All right. Hello and welcome to Lesson 1.3, What is American Democracy? Make sure that you're looking at the correct guided notes. Again, this is 1.3, and we will go ahead and get started. The objective today, student will be able to define the ideals of American democracy. Okay. At this point, you should have been introduced to the Enlightenment ideas that would eventually lead to the founders producing this country, right? Crafting this country. You also should be at this point familiar with the Roman Republic and the ancient Athenian democracy. So now we'll start looking at how did that translate? How did all those different facets translate into our current system? Okay, and this will be a good introduction to democracy as defined in America. So to begin with some definitions, a democracy, a modern democracy, is a system of government where citizens exercise power by voting. Very simple, right? Very similar to the Athenian definition, where so long as you are a citizen, so long as you are voting, then you are part of a democracy. Okay. Now, there are two types of democracy, direct and representative, and the definitions are right there in front of you. So direct democracy is a form of democracy where the people decide on issues by direct vote, right? The direct is sort of in the definition there. And this definition would be most similar to the Athenian system, where all decisions were decided by the population, by the populace, as we would say, by the citizenry. A representative democracy, on the other hand, is a form of democracy where elected officials represent a group of people as the decision makers. Okay, so a very key difference there. In the direct democracy, there's no such thing as a representative. We don't elect people in the direct democracy. But in a representative democracy, you, the voter, vote people into office who then make decisions for you and on your behalf. Finally, a republic, which is similar to representative democracy, but still different, right? There's still a distinguishing factor. This is a system where power is held by the people as well as their elected representatives, and will also have an elected president or prime minister instead of a monarch. Okay. So again, we have this key theme that's shared by representative democracy and republic, and that's the idea of electing people to represent you. Okay, so keep that in mind as we proceed. Before we get too far, though, I want to point out some differences between ancient and modern democracies. Okay, so first of all, in ancient Athens, democracy took the form of direct democracy, period. That was the only form of democracy known to the ancient world. And in that system, every citizen voted directly on issues. This should be familiar to you if you watched lesson 1.2. In modern government, democracy generally takes the form of representative democracy. Right? So if you look out across most of the modern Western civilization, and including some even Asian civilizations, Asian societies, you have representative democracies. Okay, this is again citizens voting for officials who then make decisions on issues, right? Which again, that is the purpose of that is the definition of government, right? That's where decisions are made, and politics is how those decisions are made. Another key difference is that the definition of citizen has actually expanded. Okay, so in ancient Athens, you had to be male, you had to be freeborn, and you had to own land. But in modern times, the right to vote is given to most citizens, though there are certainly exceptions, right? The right to vote is in America supposedly a constitutional right, though we will see later on that that is not always the case, right? There are very good examples where the right has been rescinded, taken away from somebody. For example, criminals, right? If you have a felony, then you cannot vote, right? Even when you are entered back into the population, general population. Even when you've been taken out of prison, your right to vote is still taken away, right? It is an incredibly controversial issue in America, even to this day. Okay, so the question now is America actually a democracy? Well, to begin that discussion, let's recall that the definition of democracy is a system of government where citizens exercise power by voting. So, by that definition, America is a democracy because in America we hold votes for all elected offices: mayor, representative, senator, president, etc. Okay, all of these are elected positions. In America, we are not in the business of direct democracy, right? We're not all voting on important issues. In fact, most of us don't even know what those issues are. Instead, we vote people into office who know the issues, who are educated about the issues, and can articulate their opinions about those issues. Most of us cannot do that. Okay? So long as our system is based upon a degree of direct voting, right, where we ourselves are casting votes, then we can safely be called a democracy. Okay? Not a direct democracy, okay, but a democracy. However, America can also be considered a republic. Okay? A republic is to remind ourselves, a republic is a system of government where power is held by the people and their elected representatives, and which has an elected president instead of a monarch. So, by that definition, let's consider the fact that in America, we exercise the right to vote in order to put our preferred leaders in power, right? Whoever gets the most votes wins the office, okay? The most famous example of this is, of course, the office of the president, right? The presidential race. If we dislike a leader's decisions, then we can vote them out of office, right? Ideally, we can vote them out of office if someone is unpopular. And this happens all the time. All the time. Okay? And in fact, if you don't vote, right, then you aren't actually being heard. Because if you're not voting, then you're not putting the right person into office. You're not helping put the right person into office, or on the flip side, helping get the wrong person out of office, right? So these are all aspects that suggest that America is also a republic. Let's do a few clarifications before we move on. A republic can be a democracy, okay, but a democracy is not necessarily a republic. It's a very clear distinction that I hope you're understanding there, okay? Every republic has democratic elements, but not every democracy has republican elements, okay? And in fact, the best way to describe American form of government is actually representative democracy, where we vote for officials to represent our views and make decisions for us. But the fact of the matter is that republic and representative democracy, they're essentially synonyms, okay? They mean essentially the same thing. So for the purposes of this class, I will most often refer to America as simply a democracy, okay? But understand that this refers to a representative democracy and not the direct democracy of ancient Athens, okay? Be sure you understand that, okay? We're not talking about direct voting. We're not talking about direct democracy. You've never voted on an issue in your life. Your parents likely have never, unless there was a certain thing put on the ballot for a mayoral election, right? Around a mayoral election. Generally speaking, we're putting people into office, and they make the decisions. So if we are a democracy, then what are our ideals, right? That's a very good question, okay? If we're going to talk about American government, let's get back to the beginning, right? On what is this democracy? On what is this government based, okay? So an ideal is a conception of something in its most perfect form, okay? You might have heard the phrase, like, what would be your ideal date? What would be your ideal boyfriend? girlfriend? What would be your ideal classroom, your ideal teacher? Okay. Ideal is something in its most perfect form, its most preferred form also. We have three in America. We have three ideals of American democracy. Make sure you get these down: liberty, equality, and self-government. And we're going to dip into each of these a little bit more. To represent liberty, we have over here the Statue of Liberty, of course, in New York. And then we also have this little symbol representing equality, okay? A man and a woman, right? Expecting equal rights, okay? And over here we have a sort of stock art picture of just a bunch of people, self-government, okay? The idea that people can make their own decisions, people can be responsible for themselves, okay? Let's start at liberty. What is it? What is liberty? It is the ability to act and think as you choose, so long as those choices don't harm another person's same liberty. Okay? So you can do what you want so long as you're not hurting somebody else's ability to do what they want. This can refer to a freedom from government control. We would call this a negative liberty, meaning this will not be taken away. Okay, so freedom from government control. Again, that's a negative liberty. A good example of this would be freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right? Where in the Constitution, it is enshrined for all to see, right? For all to read, for all of American posterity to understand that they can say what they want. They can publish what they want, right? Furthermore, regarding freedom of religion, they can practice whatever religion they want. No government is ever going to try to control that. Now, we'll see later on when we talk about the Supreme Court that there are exceptions to this. And indeed, our definition of liberty here in this country is often based on who is being harmed if somebody else is practicing their liberty, right? And is that harm great enough that the other person needs to have their liberty taken away? So liberty can also refer to, like I said, a freedom to exercise a certain right. So this would be a positive liberty. It's being given to you. Okay? The freedom to vote, the freedom to exercise a right to counsel if accused of a crime, right? Which is, of course, the Sixth Amendment, right? These are things that are granted to you, and that's why they're often seen in the Bill of Rights. Of course, the freedom of speech and freedom of religion are also in the Bill of Rights, but those are where we're saying, look, there's a boundary on what the government can do, whereas a freedom to do something, a positive liberty, is not a boundary per se, it's more an opportunity. It's a ticket given to you. It's saying this is your right to exercise this particular liberty. Nobody can ever take that away from you. Okay? What is equality? This is the idea that all people possess a fundamental moral worth that entitles them to fair treatment under the law and an equal opportunity in all aspects of life. Okay? So we have fairness in there and equality. Okay? We're all fundamentally worth something, right? We're all humans. And therefore, by our own humanity, we are entitled to be treated fairly, whether that's in school, whether that's on an airplane, whether that's in public, whether that's in, at home. Public, private, we should be treated fairly. And when it comes to equal opportunity, what we're talking about there is if two children are born in completely different circumstances, they should have an equal opportunity to succeed. Now, whether or not that actually comes true is, of course, up for discussion. And in fact, I think we'll all agree it generally is not the case, okay? But in America, the idea is that you're all given the same opportunity, okay? That's the ideal. Remember, ideal is a conception of something in its most perfect form, okay? In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." Okay, this is one of the first references from our founding fathers regarding equality. But think about this: he was a slaveholder, as were many of the founding fathers. Okay, these were wealthy white men. And the fact is that slavery in America would not be abolished until the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865. Okay, the 13th Amendment would eventually abolish slavery. This was written in 1776, so it was not quite 100 years, but almost 100 years later that Americans finally agreed that black people were equal to white people, or at least a small population of America believed that, right? Because obviously we know that racism was still very much alive, and the life of a freed slave was by no means good, right? They still risked being killed, being accused falsely. Okay, so there is this very big question of whether equality has ever actually been possible in America. Okay, and that question popped up again in the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s, where here are black people just desperately trying to be treated equally in the country, and demanding as such, demanding that they be treated equally. Okay, again, equal just saying we want to be treated fairly and we want to have an equal opportunity to all aspects of life. So a black man should be able to receive the same education as a white man, right? A black man should be able to swim in the same swimming pool. A black man should not be forced to stay in different hotels, right? These are issues of equality. What is self-government? Self-government, the third ideal, is the belief that ordinary people can aspire to rule themselves. The key to self-government is that people are the ultimate source of government's authority, which is not a foreign idea to us. We remember that this is from John Locke. This is one of Locke's big ideas that he contributed to the Enlightenment period of time. He wrote it in his second treatise on civil government. Okay? People are the source of government authority, not the government. People are. Okay? The people who are ruled over by a monarch, by a king, they are the source of the power. The Declaration of Independence declares this idea when it says, quote, "Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed," end quote. So, of course, consent here means they agreed. So we can read this as, governments are made for men, right, for people, but they get their power because the governed, the people who are governed, consented to that. Okay, so make sure you understand what that phrase means. And we'll return to that later on when we talk about the Declaration of Independence. But that's the end of video 1.3. This has been a video on the ideals of American democracy. If you missed something, please go back. Feel free to pause wherever you need, and I will see you in the next video.